Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Community Platform. First, I'd like to give apologies to those people who are expecting a program on Do Educated Women Intimidate Men? We had several phone calls and we had to change the title, and we will come back and reschedule that program. Today's program, of course, is about 9/11 and its consequences for the Muslim community. Yesterday marked 11 years since the bombings in the United States of America. What did this do for the Muslim community? During the past 11 years, we have seen atrocities being committed in the name of war on terror, which was supposed to eradicate terror. We saw 7/7. We saw Madrid bombings. We saw Bali. We saw Kenya. We saw Afghanistan. We saw Iraq. 3,000 people died on 9/11. Sad, sad day. 2 million have since died. But we also saw something else happening. We saw the vibrant Muslim community come together to bridge gaps in people's understanding about our faith, about our culture. We asked difficult questions and we were asked difficult questions. But how on earth did we reach a stage where a man with a beard and a hat, a woman with a headscarf, were perceived as potential terrorists? How did we get there? We also saw more Qur'ans being sold. We saw Islamic societies mushrooming. Did we as a Muslim community change something so negative into something positive? Osama bin Laden's name became a household name. But we've been left with many unanswered questions. Had Osama been put on trial, we may have got some answers. Who actually benefited the most from 9/11? Was Osama bin Laden really the architect of 9/11? Today, the question that we're asking, what were the consequences then and now for the Muslim community? Did your life change? If so, call us, the number is on the screen. Tell us, how did your life change, or how did you change yourself after 9/11? I'm joined by my two guests who actually need no introduction because they've been with us on many occasions. Assalamu alaikum, Majid.
Wa alaikum assalam.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, very good.
You're okay?
Alhamdulillah, fine.
Majid, you are a frequent visitor on Community Platform. It's always good to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on as well.
It's always good. And of course, here we have Mazhar Khan. Assalamu alaikum, Mazhar bhai.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Are you well?
I'm very good, alhamdulillah.
How was your day today?
Very, very hectic.
Very
busy,
hectic.
yes.
Let me ask you a question. Let me begin with you. What were the consequences for the Muslim community?
After 9/11, it's an often quoted phrase that the world changed on 9/11, and it changed more so for the Muslims than any other community in the world. Muslims living in the West and Muslims living in the Muslim world, both affected very much so. I mean, we know Muslims living in the Muslim world have been subjected to violence, state terrorism, invasion, occupation, drone attacks, and the list goes on. And Muslims in the West have been subjected to the most draconian and illiberal and laws which have been passed against the Muslim community, which 10 years ago or even a year before 9/11, nobody would have ever imagined that laws of such nature could be passed, where people could be arrested without evidence, arrested without judicial process, locked away for years without judicial process, taken away to foreign countries and tortured. Nobody could have imagined that a year before, that this is what's going to happen in the West, the home of so-called liberal and democratic values. So the world changed very much so for the Muslim world.
Yes, and when we look at a personal level, I think life changed for most of us, especially those who were in the public arena. It changed. Did the Muslim community turn such a negative aspect into something positive? Did we do something? Did we get something out of this?
I would guess it took quite a while before Muslims to figure out how to deal with the situation. It was almost a case of Muslims were caught like a rabbit in headlights. People didn't know what to do, people didn't know what to say, people no longer felt comfortable in speaking openly, thinking that maybe what I'm saying is not palatable to the Western audience. So it took quite a while for Muslims to have a think and realize, how do we now live in this new world?
Majid, do you think that the Muslim community became politically correct?
Yeah,
Did we have to, put, dots and the T's?
Yeah, definitely. As Mazhar mentioned, there was a certain climate that was built where certain ideals, ideas, certain practices, certain thoughts were almost criminalized. So if you held that view, we found many in the Muslim community beginning to disassociate from them. And any groups which call towards those views to try to stay away from them as much as they can, as individuals and as a community as well. So definitely there was a climate in which there was a shift in the way the Muslim community used to operate in the past, the way it would, as Mazhar mentioned, that it would do things in its own capacity. But now it was something different now, where you had to think twice before you say something. You'd question yourself, okay, is this going to be okay for me to say this, whether I'm at work, whether I'm at a school or at a university, or generally in a local community? What's going to be acceptable, what's not going to be acceptable? So we found a whole scene change there, where the Muslim community began to think hard before making any move on any issue. So you find a lot of things were actually watered down. So if you said something against, like, an Iraq invasion which was going to take place in 2003, you'd get questioned, look, where does your loyalty lie now? Because in 2001, that was the question, are you loyal citizens of a state living in the West? So who do you support? As an American and as a Muslim, do you support the American state now? Or do you support the Muslim world? And we were put under the same radar like this as well.
So you're either with us or you're against us.
So that was the famous George Bush statement which resonated here as well. Who are you? Are you British? Are you British first? Are you Muslims first? Where are you? Where are your allegiances?
The British identity. I think it was during that time or maybe afterwards that somehow we were asked, how could we possibly tell about our Britishness? And we had to search. Did that push people to the brink? Did it push people, to adopt those values which they never have thought? I mean, when we think about women in headscarf, for instance, just an example, we saw a lot of women adopting headscarf after 1979 Iranian Revolution. Did you think that changed, and that the consequences of that people read, about their faith? There were more books sold. There were more people who actually became Muslims after 9/11 in America.
There's definitely a wake-up call. Definitely we can see that Muslims were put on the spot. If you were strong in your thinking and you were clear in your views, you stood your ground and you continued what you would do before. You had certain people coming out and making statements, as Mazhar has mentioned, which were there for a Western audience, which were there to silence them and say, look, we're here, we're Muslims, we're fine, we don't want any trouble. Stuff like calling the British troops who were going into Afghanistan in 2001 to kill Muslims and to wage an illegal war as their boys. I was really surprised when I started hearing these views. How can you even do that?
So now semantics seems to have shifted.
That's right, yeah. So all of a sudden the dynamics changed. The thinking began to change for certain people, not for everybody. I wouldn't say for every single Muslim it was like this. But you began to find that there was a new style of thinking being pushed forward for the Muslim community. And a lot of these were being fashioned by the government themselves, where Muslim groups were being put onto the spot to say certain things, or otherwise have your funding jeopardized from the Labour government at that time. Prevent came after as well then. So Prevent is another good example of this, where here's some money, but you must say these things. Here's some money from the government directly, we'll give it to you as women groups. But you must start to stand up and say certain things now. You must talk about equality, and you should start talking about how Islam is not doesn't really provide equality, but Western society gives everybody equal status. So I find a lot of these discussions started to change, and Islam became rebranded for a lot of people as well.
But do you think that, whereas I agree with you, I mean, if you look at the Prevent strategy that it came about, but some people actually utilized that, didn't they? Some people actually responding by asking the difficult question, is Prevent? A lot of people didn't take part in the Prevent. Some people did. But there was something good that also came out of that.
Yeah, the good that came out of that is a lot of people got exposed with their fingers, in the wrong pies.
Well, let's not go into that.
And yeah, like you mentioned, a lot of people didn't take prevent money, which
Sure
is
they
government
didn't.
funding money,
Sure.
government funded money for projects which they wanted the Muslim community to take on board. Famous one was where Ruth Kelly, former Home and Community Minister, she said we want to create a British version of Islam. Quite open. Now what does that mean? Islam is Islam at the end of the day, whether you live in Makkah, whether you live in Karachi, whether you live in India, whether you live in Malaysia, Islam is Islam at the end of the day. Why do you need to create a new British Islam? And Jack Straw in 2002, he made a very similar statement. He actually said that we want to create a European form of Islam, a type of Islam which is suitable for Europe. So,
Mazhar Bhai, what Majid has said, creating a European Islam or Islam that is suitable for Europe, what's wrong with that? I mean, we're not living in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. We're not living in an Arab country. We're living in the United Kingdom. What is wrong with having an Islam which is acceptable in the West? That means that we are not removing any of the basics, but you are trying to live within the Western world. Is there something wrong with that?
You can live with Islam wherever you live. You can live as a Muslim in the Muslim world, and you can live as a Muslim in the non-Muslim world. But you live by Islam. You don't take your Islam and then change it when you go to a different society where values and tastes are different. Because if that's the case, then Islam would lose its shape and form. And you've got to ask the question was, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed Islam, the day it was revealed, did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not know that what He was revealing was not going to be suitable in a different place and at a different time in a different community? So obviously we can't.
Yeah. But I don't think, I'm playing the devil's advocate here, but I'm saying is maybe the politicians were saying, you're not living in Pakistan, you're living in Europe. You can practice your faith with a difference. That's not mean that you give up any of your values, but let's see how we can integrate.
Yeah, okay.
Not assimilate, but integrate.
Okay. The problem with the values thing is that what's the point of having a value if it's got no effect on a person, or if it doesn't translate into some change in society, or if it doesn't manifest itself? If a value cannot manifest itself in action or behavior, that value is pointless. So a value is there to shape a person's behavior, and a value is there to shape society. Now, when the values of Islam do not fit nicely in either a secular society or a tribal society or a whatever society, that society will try and change Islam. And this is nothing new. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in Mecca, the Quraysh tried to change his values. They tried to ask him to compromise. When the British came to India, they tried to change Islam there because they didn't agree with the values Islam had, and hence they gave birth to the Qadiani movement. Islam without politics, and Islam without jihad, Islam without changing society. That's a nice Islam. That's your Anglo-Saxon or your Anglican Church of Islam.
Yeah, but let me give you an example. My heritage is from Pakistan, right? When I'm in Pakistan, I would have never thought of going to a mosque for prayers, right? It would never occur to me. But living in the United Kingdom, I work, I travel, and I see a mosque. It's time for prayer. I can go. That's not changing my value. I'm just saying that the need has occurred. Do I need to build that need without refuting any of my Islamic laws?
That's not changing Islam, that's applying Islam.
Right. Now, the fact is, maybe that's what the politicians were saying. Let's apply to where we are living. Maybe we just didn't understand them.
No, they had a very clear agenda. We've got to say this, and it's very clear in the reports which came out, whether this was Contest 1 paper or Contest 2. Contest 1 came out in 2003. And these documents and these government papers all came out after 9/11 and 2006 blast that happened in London as well there then. 2003 was the first one called Contest 1. Mm-hmm. They was quite open in saying that there's certain aspects of Islam which is challenging our foreign policy. Mm-hmm. If Muslims in this country are challenging our foreign policy in the Muslim world, how does that reflect on our role in the Muslim world, where we're trying to convince people of our democratic values, of our Western way of life, and that should be the best for you? So if people in Afghanistan are saying, look, you come to invade us and give us democratic values, at the barrel of a gun, by the barrel of a gun. But at the same time, we've got Muslims inside the UK. They're not convinced of this war. They say this war is illegal. So therefore, our ideas, our affiliations, and our thoughts are more closer to the Muslim community in the UK there. So what they were trying to do is trying to change the opinions of Muslims here. It's trying to say, do you know what? You need to start clapping and applauding everything that we do internationally. So when we go into Iraq, you should clap. Say, look, this is good. This is the British way of doing things. If we go into Afghanistan, you should say the British forces are doing a very good job there. In actual fact, it's an occupation, and even the United Nations clearly said this, that it was an illegal invasion in the end. But later on, they had to change their mind.
Sure. So let's take this call. Assalamu alaikum.
wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Mohtarama, मैं उर्दू में बात कर सकता हूँ?
Mr. Khan from
Bradford.
Ji, Mr. Khan, what is your comment or question, sir?
Can I speak Urdu, please, if you don't mind?
जी जी फरमाइए, मगर आपका जो भी सवाल हो मेरे भाई और जो भी कमेंट हो मुख्तसर हो प्लीज।
अच्छा ठीक है, वो मुख्तसर ये है कि असल में जैसा कि आपने कहा कि यहाँ की जो पॉलिटिक्स है वो कहती है कि ऐसा इस्लाम लाओ जैसा यूरोप और ब्रिटानिया या मिडिल ईस्ट ये लोग एक्सेप्ट कर लें। असल में वो ठीक कहते हैं कि हमारे बाज नौजवानों ने ऐसा लिबास और ऐसा चेहरे का रवैया अख्तियार किया, जो दाढ़ी रखी है या टोपी या टर्बन पहनी है, वो इस तरह लगती थी जिस तरह कोई हाई जैकर है। हमारे साथ फलस्तीन में एक दफा कुछ नौजवान गए तो जिनका लिबास और दाढ़ी मुबारक बिल्कुल ठीक थी, उनको यहूदियों ने बंद नहीं किया, उनको पास किया। एक शख्स ऐसा था जिसका लिबास, जिसकी दाढ़ी मुबारक, जिसके वो टर्बन ऐसा मालूम होता था ये तो कोई दहशतगर्द है। असल में हम लोगों ने इस्लाम को अगर दिल की गहराई से एक्सेप्ट करते तो ये लोग हमें देखकर मुसलमान हो जाते। मैं जहाँ काम करता था वहाँ यहूदी मैनेजर था, यहूदियों की अक्सरियत थी और ईसाई भी थे, लेकिन अल्लाह के फजल से मुझसे लोग उर्दू और पंजाबी अच्छे लोग बोलने वाले मौजूद थे। जब कोई इस्लाम की बात होती वो मुझसे पूछते। एक दफा एक आदमी अंग्रेजी उर्दू अच्छा जानने वाला, उसने कहा मुझसे पूछो ये आदमी इसको पंजाबी उर्दू नहीं आता। वो मैनेजर को गुस्सा चढ़ गया, कहने लगा कम से कम अपना लिबास तो तू ठीक कर ले। तो ये बात है, अगर हम अपना लिबास, अपना बोलचाल जो अंग्रेजी है ये दुरुस्त हो जाए तो हमें आइंदा आने वाला।
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपका खान साहब, as usual, full of passion. Jazakallah khair.
Yeah, I think he was alluding to how because of the way Muslims were dressing, and some men had beards and they had the imamas on, they would be the subject of abuse. So I tried to catch up, and I think that's what he was referring to there, that we've had a lot of trouble since then, and I think he's possibly agreeing with us that they are trying to change Islam inside this country.
हमारे खान साहब जो हैं वो regular, yes, alhamdulillah. But so the people did have, the consequences were that people did suffer, getting on the plane.
Definitely, yes. All the texts which came in on the airports and everything. The X-ray.
The whole body is being X-rayed.
That's right. The body's X-ray, body's kind of. These are specifically designed because, Muslims are, number one in terms of potential terrorists, and therefore every one of these guys needs to be screened. So even if you're in niqab, you're gonna have to be screened there. But I think there was some contention to that, and I'm not sure if that's continuing.
Yeah, well, I think in America still is. I think there are certain areas in UK where that it still continues. But I think there's an option. There's an option, but we don't know yet. That Mazhar bhai, what have we gained? What from 9/11? Did we, as a Muslim community, did it give us an opportunity to come together?
I think 9/11 put a lot of pressure on the Muslim community, and with all pressure and difficulties, it's the way the world works. It's the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings about a new situation. Is with every difficulty, it purifies and it cleanses something. So I think because of 9/11, a lot of Muslims asked themselves these questions: who are we? What are we? Where are we? And a lot of people thought, well, we're British. Yes, we accept British values. We are British Muslims, meaning that Islamic values, Sharia, well, that's not so important anymore. the political issues going around the world, well, they don't affect us because we're British. We're more concerned about the national health and we're more concerned about this and that.
Shouldn't we be?
Well,
shouldn't we be
no,
concerned? I'll come back to that question. We've got a caller. Let's take this call, but just hang on to that. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Iman.
Wa alaikum salam, Auntie Ji.
Sorry?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
How are you doing, all right?
Alhamdulillah. And yes, what is your comment or what is your question?
Basically, my comment is basically when sort of 9/11 happened, obviously there was a lot of negative, vibes going around the world and stuff. But, out of all that sort of darkness, I think a lot of people sort of, started to question what Islam was. And even in the West, we saw a lot of conversions to Islam happening, a lot of white intellectual sort of conversions happening to Islam, and where they were arguing, that this is the sort of true answer, for mankind, whether it's political, economic, social, right? Because that's what Islam sort of tries to tackle. It tackles economic justice, it tackles political justice, it tackles social justice.
Sure. May I just ask you a question?
Yeah.
Did 9/11 have a consequence for you? Personally, did it have a consequence for you?
It had a consequence for every Muslim, I'd say.
No. So, how did it affect you?
It affected me because it sort of thrust, not just me, but the wider Muslim community in Britain and, in terms of worldwide, on the spotlight. The cameras were always on Muslims. What are Muslims up to? What they're doing? What they're thinking?
Sure.
How do they think? What do they think?
Sure.
So obviously it had an impact on, I'd say, every Muslim. I think is, again, coming back to it, a lot of intellectuals did convert to Islam. And, people are, waking up to the fact that, this movement is not, it tackles, Islam deals with problems that the West can't deal with, right? Because it deals with economic justice, which maybe the people, the economic system of the West doesn't, because it's capitalistic, right? And Islam, we're not capitalistic. It's about economic justice for everybody, whether it's Jew, Christian, Muslim, right?
Sure.
And that's what sort of people are concerned about.
Thank you so much for your time. Jazakallah khair. Thank you.
Yeah, what I was saying earlier was that so Muslims were now being forced to say, well, we're British Muslims, what concerns you is concerns us. But the issue of that, hold on a second, the whole 9/11 issue, the whole war on terror is just an excuse to further British, Western, foreign interest, political agenda around the world and also locally. We forget about that. So for example, people were reluctant to talk about Iraq, Afghanistan, Palestine. People were reluctant to talk about Islamic law in Muslim countries, and they were more happy to talk about jobs, economy, and what everybody else talks about. I'm not saying that's not important, but not at the expense of core Islamic issues.
Couldn't we have done, we'll come back to it again. I'm so sorry, I seem to be cutting you. You think I'm doing this on purpose. I'm not, We're going to take a short break and we'll come back to that. Please join me back within the next few minutes. The number is on the screen. Get involved. Tell us what consequences did it have for you. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Community Platform. Today's discussion is on 9/11 and its consequences for the Muslim community. Muslim community has suffered not only in the United Kingdom but throughout the world. The knee-jerk reaction to go to war with Iraq, was that planned? We don't know. But we do know that if there's one country that has suffered immensely with reference to war on terror, that's Pakistan. Pakistan has given much more than any other country. The Muslims there have suffered because of the consequences of 9/11. Today, the Muslim world is paying the price of 9/11. Join me and my two colleagues and get involved in a conversation. The number is on the screen. Please call and tell us what were the consequences for you. Muhammad Iqbal from London, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. What do you have to say? What is your comment or your question?
I've got a quick comment. I think in terms of this whole 9/11, 7/7, I think these are events which, in terms of a geopolitical sense, are of no consequence in terms of the Western, sovereignty. They believe that they have the right to go into any country and do anything they want. So these are excuses for them to do whatever they want, be it Pakistan, be it Iraq, be it Iran, be it whatever. What 9/11 did was this: it replaced a civilization which was a communist, which the West used as a bogeyman in order to justify their evils, their immoral acts. Islam became that. It became Islamophobia, Islamofascism, whatever it was, whatever you defined it, it became the evil which the good West wanted to overcome. So from that perspective, nothing's changed. The West will always do that. From the consequence of the Muslim perspective, it's allowed Western governments, in effect, to go into Muslim land, bomb whenever they want. In terms of localized, in terms of us in the UK, it's allowed draconian laws to be implemented. It's made Muslims question each other. It's made Muslims think, you know what, that guy's a fundamentalist. He's probably going to do something dodgy. It's done what it did in America in the McCarthy age in terms of communism, but communists were like bad people. Communists were like outed. And the same thing, we might think, yes, as Muslims, it's asked or it's made many people question their Islam and become stronger. But it's made many people question their Islam and actually question other Muslims and make other Muslims scapegoats. And to be honest, if I look at it in a political sense, what have we achieved in the last several years in terms of localized society? We don't even have a political entity, right? We all split up into different things, right? You conquer by dividing, and we divided internationally, localized in many numerous ways. And in terms of how this may have affected me personally, 9/11 didn't affect me that much when I was at university. When 7/7 happened, I got onto a London tube. And could you imagine this? Getting onto the tube, I had three particular train carriages to myself. People walked off and went to the other train. They would not get into a train with me, right? Because I had a beard, I wore a jubba, and I was going to university. I was going to one of the best universities in the UK, but they would not get into a train with me. So this is what we call hatred. Now, these people are not bad who did this, but the fact is this is what was fed into them. So I think we need to clue up a bit, end of the day, and don't think ourselves to be a special character in terms of the Western policy. They're going to do what they want to do, but we need to realize what we are going to do in terms of our temporal and transcendent realm. Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair. Thank you for making that call. It did affect our young people, especially young men, when the brother was just saying, that to be dressed in that manner and to be, picked on. So there were consequences. Women had the headscarves stretched.
Yeah, it's true.
From their heads. At a very personal level, I have a very weird sense of humor. I mean, I would actually, go. I have to go abroad sometimes, and I would fly, and I would talk about certain things. But I had to control. I felt that there was a control. We had to control that you didn't make a joke, or that you didn't say something that could be misconstrued, or that you didn't wear a certain type of clothing, because when you went through the barrier, that it wouldn't, say that it was ring, and you have to be checked. So I think it put a lot of people in a very difficult position. But I keep coming back to the question, what have we done because of those consequences to make better, how do we move forward?
Yeah, you mentioned some of these points earlier on. At universities, Islamic society has got a lot more active.
Yes.
They had to.
Yes.
Otherwise, silence is considered as consent, or you're kind of agreeing with the situation. So at that time, I was at university, and we really pushed forward with a lot of activities which dealt with a lot of these discussions.
Sure.
So, for example, one of the discussions was, is Islam uncivilized? Because America's excuse for going into Afghanistan, number one, is they said the architect of the 9/11 incident is based in Afghanistan. Secondly, an Islamic government is a fascist government. It's uncivilized and it's backward, and does have no place in modernity. So we actually raised a lot of these. Yeah, we raised a lot of these discussions. Is Islam uncivilized? And questioned that. Our open platform for non-Muslims to come down and review Islam and see what Islam is all about in these political discussions. We had discussions about why are non-Muslims turning to Islam. So beyond
that's something very strange, isn't it? Here you have 9/11, then you had 7/7, but we saw a rise in, and it was people becoming accepting Islam, alhamdulillah. But women were at the forefront.
Yeah, it was an interesting trend definitely, and it's going to happen. As the brother mentioned on the phone just now, is that there's a certain climate which is fed to people, and certain messages are put forward that Sharia is bad, Islam is backward, Muslim women are persecuted, they don't have any rights, roles, responsibilities, they can't enter politics, there's not equality in an Islamic society, and that's why we as the Western world, we need to fight these. We need to fight these ideals, and we need to fight those countries which push forward this barbaric version of a 7th century religion.
Absolutely.
So this is what was going on there. So naturally people are going to start reading and questioning, and if you're a Muslim, they'll ask you certain questions. Why do you do this? Why do you do this for? Do you really treat women like this? What's your political ideas? Do you believe in dictatorship or do you believe in democracy? Do you have elections inside Islam?
Well, it's a good
do you
job
even
they
have
didn't
politics?
ask me that about dictatorship. Mazhar bhai, are we prepared to, let me take this call. The call always comes when I turn to him. He thinks,
Conspiracy.
yeah, absolutely. There's a conspiracy theory here. Assalamu alaikum, is Ziara from Birmingham?
Wa alaikum salam.
I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. Sister, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Gee, sister, you have a point or a comment or a question?
I had a comment. Yeah, I had a comment, sorry. Okay, so the brothers have raised some really good points, mashallah, and basically I just wanted to say, I think that 9/11, it really opened the floodgates, and it became a perfect opportunity for the West to start their campaign against Islam. But the point I wanted to really make was that I wanted to make the point about why is there a campaign against Islam in the first place, and the reason is that the West see Islam as a threat. So, why do I say this? Alhamdulillah, now we see so many more Muslims, they prioritize Islam in their lives, and, they're beginning to rediscover their love for Islam, and it's very different from when, say, old generations of Muslims came to Britain, and they adopted their lives to kind of fit into the British way of life, so they kind of kept their heads down, they wanted to make a good life for their family, but that's changed now, and the thing is, the British government, when practicing Islam, it's kind of just to your personal life, it's not a problem, but when it starts to spread to the point where you want to implement Islam in your entire life, like on all levels, that's when it does become a problem. We've seen a new generation taking a stand. Britain is witnessing a revival of Islam in the Ummah, and the want and need to live under Islam. And the point is that we're kind of waking up and looking at the inconsistencies and flaws in the democratic system, the injustices that are being carried out across the Muslim world in the name of democracy, the occupation of Muslim lands. And, these growing calls, the growing call we see on on YouTube and Facebook, of the Ummah calling for Islam, it sent shockwaves through the West. And the point is now, because of this threat, this is why they're kind of attacking Islam, because they see it as a threat and they want to attack the basis of what we believe in. So obviously they know that we'll never give up Islam. So the point is, they think, okay, what do? We change what they believe in the first place. So we'll introduce a British Islam with, say, taking the concept of, sovereignty belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or such things. They'll change that. And what I just wanted to say as well was that, sorry, I'll be quick.
You've said it well. You've said it well. It's always a pleasure to hear from young Muslim young ladies. Jazakallah khair, sister. Thank you so much.
Oh, right,
So just following on from what the sister said, certain things don't change. And some of the dynamics that play during the time when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in Mecca are the same dynamics that play today. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam started his da'wah, at first they ignored it. Here in Britain, when people came as immigrants in the 50s and 60s, they thought, okay, they've got their funny clothes, their kids will be like us, or their kids' kids will be like us.
They'll assimilate.
But the point is, it's irrational what's happened, because it doesn't make sense that these people have come from another country, they're not educated, generally speaking, they've come here, their kids have come to our schools, their kids go to our workplaces, their kids read our books, the kids read our culture, yet the more they live here, the more visual Islam becomes. It's not rational, it doesn't make sense. And this is like the hidden hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala playing. Same thing happened in Mecca. The Quraysh, when they saw Islam was growing, then they used the heavy-handed tactic. And this is what's happening now.
Good analogy, I like that.
Because they couldn't culture us because they couldn't win us over with the softly approach. Now they're using their heart and using legislation to force us into accepting their values, where Tony Blair after 7/7 said that if Muslims believe in a caliphate, if Muslims believe in Sharia law, if Muslims are against our troops, they are terrorists, they are extremists. So now they're coming out. Now they're coming out with what they really do believe, that we don't like your values, we don't like your Islam, and now it's coming out. And they're concerned, people never ask this question, why do they see Islam as a threat? When I pray 5 times a day, how's that a threat to the West? If I grow a beard, how's that a threat to the West? Those aren't the things. What's a threat to them is the Islamic way of life. The Quraysh were worried that if Muhammad ﷺ becomes successful, this man's talking about one God. We've got 360 odd gods in the Kaaba. Every tribe in Arabia has to come to Mecca, has to spend their money here. We've got a market. If he talks about one God, we will lose our prestige. And the West is worried about that if the Sharia comes to the Muslim world, what's going to happen to our interests? What's going to happen to our oil?
We're going to need a whole topic on the Sharia. Let's take this call. Brother Wasim from Wakefield, I believe.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. What is your message or statement or question?
Well, basically, 9/11's got nothing to do with Muslims. It was an inside job, which George Bush and America did themselves. And the biggest war criminals and terrorists on the planet are George Bush, Tony Blair, and Benjamin Netanyahu. So, Wasim Ahmed from Wakefield, I'm saying it live on TV. If anyone wants to debate that, come down to Wakefield, ask anybody. They can still show you where I am. Okay.
Jazakallah khair for the invitation. Jazakallah khair, thank you. Well, there are people who don't believe that 9/11 was, as brother said, was committed by Osama bin Laden, that he was not the architect of 9/11. The fact is, it happened. It happened. We were blamed. We were held at ransom. Let me come back to what you were saying earlier about Tony Blair. And I just wanted to score a point, I think. This is why Bishop Tutu did not share a platform with him in South Africa this month.
But can I add something to that? Bishop Tutu said that and people acclaimed him. What a man of principle.
Yes.
If a Muslim man or a Maulana said that, they said, terrorist extremists. The thing is, we are not allowed to say the things that we want to say.
But we can't stop.
Of course we can't. And
we cannot stop.
We continue to say it. And that's why those who are brave enough and strong enough and confident enough to say it, they get labeled and demonized. But those people will carry on because the same thing happens to all people of principle. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was demonized and persecuted. If you go against the grain, you will face the heat. But it's the heat which, makes you as a person. It's the heat. And again, with the 9/11, people ask themselves, where's my loyalty? My loyalty is not with Britain. My loyalty is not with Pakistan. My loyalty is not with any particular land. My loyalty is what is right and what is wrong against
justice. Justice.
And so we will, even in Islam, even if we live in an Islamic state, even if you've got a Khalifa ruling over you, Islam tells you that you only obey him on condition.
Yes, the conditions.
So we don't have unconditional loyalty to anyone or anything except to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we're not anti-British, we are just pro-justice and pro-the truth.
From Manchester, Assalamu alaikum. Hello.
Hello.
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam, sister.
You have a message, a question, or a statement, sir?
I don't know whether it's a statement or a message. I just wanted to say a couple of things regarding 9/11. What I believe is Muslims are basically, it's basically obviously it's a conspiracy theory that's been going on since 9/11, 2000, and God knows when. But I believe that there's another thing which I would like to say is that in Urdu we call it that jhoot ko itna zyada bolo ke wo sach lagne lage. And I think media is playing a very critical part at this point in time by portraying all these things again and again and again and again. And they're not showing the things that are happening in Palestine, Bosnia, Kashmir. They're not showing anything that's happening in Pakistan, India. They're not showing anything that's happening in the other Muslim countries. All they're showing is 9/11, something happened, 4,000 people died. Yes, we know that. But why keep portraying it all the time, and why keep saying this, that, Muslims are the only people who actually has done it? Obviously, because of the whole Osama bin Laden and everything. But this media is actually going really, really against Muslim. So it's basically the media that has to, get into the right state of mind. I'm originally from Pakistan. And I've seen that every single time you switch on the TV, there are dreadful news. They always show the negative side of the world, or the negative side of the Muslims, the negative side, as in terms of that we have Shia, Sunni problems, then we have Barelvi, and we have this problem, that problem, and West is just taking a benefit of it. If we look into the the Muslim history, it's always the inside person that is actually bring the whole empire down.
True.
And we have some people who are actually manipulating and using Islam in their own way. In Pakistan, I haven't really come across people. I mean, I've come across people who are using Islam in their own way, in their own benefit. So sometimes say, yeah, okay, Sood is not right, or it's haram, or it's halal, or, Sood is... They're just going to change the whole terminology. Instead of calling it Sood, they start calling it interest-free banking, which is actually interest banking. Then we have so many other things. I mean, the basic issue here is that we are really, our focus is actually diverted. We have started making, we're talking about heroes like Steve Jobs, or in our university we call them superheroes. We don't call Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq, or we don't teach about Hazrat Umar Farooq. We only teach about these people till about 4th, 5th, 6th grade, that's it. After that, that's it, we're done. After that, we have motivational seminars, corporate lectures, in which we talk about the leadership of these big people. What we don't really talk about is these caliphs, these Khulafa Rashidin, these Sahaba Ikram. I think this is where the whole problem is. We are not getting I mean, how many Nobel Prize winners, Muslims, we've seen since Al-Biruni or Al-Farabi?
You have raised a very important point, brother. And this is exactly what is needed. Education, good leadership qualities.
Yeah.
And it will not work unless we have that leadership quality. Then, of course, you sound very young, and I hope that you will take that,
Oh, yes, I've already taken 1-2 steps. I mean, I'm doing
well
it.
done. Thank you for your call, brother. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah.
I just want to follow on from what this young man was saying. That we need more, good leadership who understand their faith. Have we got good leadership? I mean, are we producing that caliber of people in our mosques, outside the mosques, political arena and outside the political arena?
Yeah, I think one of the points the brother made was quite interesting. Was talking specifically about Pakistan.
Sure.
The amount of Islam that we get finishes at 5th Jamaat, and after that then it's all about the wonders of the West, the glorious history of Western civilization, and all the kind of like the world standards which the Western world is, which it kind of pushes forward. I think that's coming to a huge question now. So if you look at the rise of anti-Americanism around the world, it's not just the Muslim world, but you've got people in Brazil, in Chile, in Europe, Africa. Many people question America and the role of America in the world. So they talk about, how America influences the education, influences the media. So for example, there's allegations against certain television networks in Pakistan which are purely financed by the US, have been given financial aid to broadcast a certain narrative of events and not to question anything. So for example, these television networks will never talk about the abductions which are taking place under the pretext of fighting the war on terror. I mean, I'm familiar with one. I've been following a campaign. It's called the Free Naveed Butt campaign.
Yes.
The spokesperson for Hizb ut-Tahrir Pakistan.
Yes.
For the last 5 months, the brother's absent.
Yes.
And his sons and his young sons is 10 and 11. They're outside with placards with their families at the press clubs, trying to find out where their father is. Why the television networks not covering these discussions?
I agree.
So that's very important that he touched upon a topic where education and media is fed in such a way that, Islam is redundant to certain things. Just go to the mosque and that's it. Never ever question the politics. Never ever question the things which are coming from outside in terms of the influences into our country. All he's supposed to remain is silent and the pacifist Muslim. So to get leadership, we need to become re-educated with that new Islamic way of thinking. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is what he did. He generated a band of people who before had no credibility, who had no standing in the world. And these people became the rulers of the world. These people were feared in the sense of their power was feared. In that, these Muslims, they've got justice, they've got leadership. Wherever they go, they walk into lands. People accept them. People accept their authority. People accept their lifestyle. So these are, hugely principled people. So we've got to, I think, pick up from these examples from the past and learn about how to raise these in the dynamics that we're facing now.
Absolutely. One of the things that I read somewhere, that one of the reason for the downfall of the Ottoman Empire was that they stopped teaching live sciences in their madrasas. We need to bring back that kind of education. We seem to think, as the brother just talked about, that teaching Islam finishes at a certain age. But it has to be a lifelong learning. How can you possibly put an end and say, well, it's finished now, that's it? And you've put them out in the world without any guidance.
That's right.
You know, we haven't got that kind of
And
leadership.
that's why post 9/11, you found that even just yesterday, Obama made a comment. He said that America, the USA, is not at war with Islam. So they have to say these type of things.
Yes.
Why are they
The
saying
elections
them?
are coming up.
Elections are coming anyway, but they have to say these politically motivated comments to pacify the sentiments of the Muslim world. So how did they tackle this? They have ideological culturing of the Muslim world. How come we got MTV Pakistan? What's MTV got to do with the youth there? Is that our culture? Is this our heritage? Is this where our history is born from? Are these our values? These are morals? Is this where we were brought up? No, it isn't. But there's continuous culturing about what is good, what is bad, what is acceptable in the world, how you must view world events. That's what needs to be completely challenged right from the grassroots and completely reshaped, so we get a generation of Muslims living in a state and a society which challenges the world arena. So we challenge when America says, yeah, we are a peace-loving nation, we want to spread global justice. That's rubbish, because on the one hand,
by bombing.
Yeah, by bombing,
by drone attack,
or by there's this issue about this new film which has been released.
Well, yes, that's another topic that we need to touch up. But I have my own ideas. 30 seconds to evaluate consequences of 9/11 on the Muslim community.
Consequences of 9/11 on the Muslim is nothing other than to re-engineer the Muslims' societies to generate or create an Islamic society which is compatible and palatable to Western taste and values. That was their agenda. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a different plan. And in the same way the Russians went into Afghanistan, and that was the straw that broke the back of the communist Soviet bloc and it brought a collapse to that. They've spent over $1 trillion in the wars. And they had no idea when they went in 2001, when they planned their wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, they had no idea that it would cost them $1 trillion. It's bleeding them dry. And I believe in the same way the Afghan war brought about the death of the Soviet Union, I believe this is the straw that will bring about a new geopolitical change in the world.
They say that a wise man learns from other people's mistakes. You don't have to make those mistakes. We continuously make the same mistakes. 30 seconds, Majid.
Yeah, I think Mazhar summed it up. I can't really
He
add
did,
anything
didn't
to it.
he?
He did, yeah.
Yeah, he did well.
But yeah, just some of the main points have been from today's discussions that there has been a lot of pressure upon the Muslim community, but we must rise above this. We must stand to our principles and continuously push forward with them. And through that, we'll find that people will listen to a lot of the things that we have to say about Islam, about our deen, represent it correctly, and at the same time, shape the world that we're living in.
Thank you. The world, I read this somewhere, and I'm not sure who's written it, it could be Einstein, that the world is a dangerous place not because of those who do evil, but those who remain silent. And if we remain silent today, we will be responsible for creating a dangerous place. We demand justice, we must stand up for justice, and we must stand up for those who are incarcerated without having done or committing any criminal activity. And I can tell you that one name that comes to my mind immediately is Babar Ahmed. Join me next week for another discussion. Community platform is your platform. Until then, look after yourself and your neighbor, whoever they may be. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.